Hong Kong, Kowloon, Nathan Road, just south of the Star Ferry Terminal. September 1972. Saturday morning around 10 a.m. A girl was sitting on a blanket on the sidewalk with paintings spread around her like a fan. Watercolors. Small ones, maybe 6 inches by 8. She had them propped against a cardboard box she'd cut up and folded into little easels. Smart kid. The paintings were flowers mostly. Orchids. Lotuses. A few birds. The kind of thing tourists walking to the ferry terminal might stop and buy for a couple of Hong Kong dollars to take home as souvenirs. Nobody was stopping. The girl had been there since 7 a.m. 3 hours. Not a single sale. She was 10 years old. She weighed maybe 55 pounds, which was about 15 pounds less than a 10-year-old should weigh. She was wearing a cotton dress that was clean but faded from being washed too many times. No shoes. A scarf wrapped around her head, not for fashion because she didn't have hair. Chemo does that. Takes the hair first, then the weight, then the energy, then, if you're unlucky, everything else. Her name was Mei Ling, and she was dying. But that's not why I'm telling you this story. I'm telling you this story because of the man who stopped. Now get this. In September 1972, Bruce Lee was the most famous person in Hong Kong. Not one of the most famous. The most famous. The big boss had broken every box office record in the territory. Fist of Fury had broken those records again. He couldn't walk down the street without getting mobbed. He wore sunglasses everywhere. Changed his route to the studio every day. Had people drive him places just so he could get from point A to point B without spending 45 minutes signing autographs. And on this particular Saturday morning, Bruce Lee was walking down Nathan Road. On foot. No driver. No sunglasses. No entourage. Just a man in a plain shirt and dark pants, carrying a paper bag of roast pork buns he'd bought from a street vendor because his wife Linda had told him they were out of breakfast food and somebody needed to go get some. He almost walked past the girl. Almost. Hundreds of people already had. Nathan Road on a Saturday morning is a river of bodies, and a 10-year-old on a blanket selling paintings is just another piece of the landscape. You walk past it like you walk past fire hydrants and mailboxes. You see it without seeing it. But Bruce Lee didn't walk past. He stopped. And here's the thing. He didn't stop because of the girl. He stopped because of the paintings. Stay with me on this one. Because what happened next is the kind of story that changes how you think about what famous people are supposed to do with their fame. Bruce stood about 4 feet from the blanket. He was looking at one painting in particular. A crane. Not a flower, not a lotus, not any of the safe tourist stuff. A crane standing in water, one leg up, head turned, catching a fish. The brushwork was loose and confident. The water looked like water. The bird looked like it was actually standing in it, not pasted on top of it. And the colors were subtle. Not the bright, loud colors that kids usually use. Muted. Controlled. The kind of color choices that art teachers spend years trying to get their students to understand. This was not a 10-year-old's painting. Except it was. Because the 10-year-old was sitting right there, watching the stranger stare at her work. "You painted this?" Bruce asked. Cantonese. Direct. The girl looked up at him. She didn't recognize him. Bruce Lee without sunglasses and context was just a fit Chinese guy in a plain shirt. She saw a potential customer, not a movie star. Yes, all of them. $5 each. Bruce picked up the crane painting, held it at arm's length, tilted it to catch the light the way you do when you're actually looking at a painting, not just glancing at it. "The crane's weight is on the wrong leg," he said. Mei Ling blinked. Nobody had ever critiqued her paintings before. They either walked past or said, "How pretty," and kept walking. Nobody had looked closely enough to notice that the crane's weight distribution was off. "Cranes stand on their left leg when they fish," Bruce continued. "You've got the weight on the right. The head turn is correct, though. And the water is very good." "How do you know about cranes?" Mei Ling asked. "I study how things move. It's my job." Think about that for a second. Bruce Lee, the greatest martial artist who ever lived, a man who spent his entire life studying how bodies move through space, was standing on a sidewalk giving a 10-year-old girl a technical critique of her bird painting. Not because he was being nice, because he was being honest. And honest, for Bruce, was the only way to treat someone whose work you took seriously. "Are you an artist?" Mei Ling asked. "No, but I know when something is good. And this is good." He set the crane painting down, picked up another, a lotus on a pond, then another, a sparrow on a branch. He went through all 14 paintings, slowly, one at a time. The bag of roast pork buns was getting cold in his other hand, and he didn't care. If you've been with me this far, hit that subscribe button. Because the conversation that happened next is the part that nobody knew about for 30 years. Bruce crouched down. Not because Mei Ling was short, although she was. Because talking to someone while standing over them is a lecture. Talking to someone at eye level is a conversation. Bruce knew the difference. He always had. He was eye level with her now, close enough to see her face clearly. And at this distance, he saw what the crowd hadn't bothered to notice. The scarf hiding a bald head, the hollowed cheeks, the bruises on her arms from 4 lines, the thinness that wasn't poverty thin. It was sick thin, treatment thin, the kind of thin that happens when medicine is keeping you alive but taking everything else in the process. "You're not well," Bruce said. Not a question. Mei Ling's jaw tightened. She was 10 years old, and she had the jaw of a 40-year-old woman who had been fighting for too long. "I'm fine." "You're not. But that's your business." He held up the crane painting. "Why are you selling these?" And believe me, this is where Mei Ling said something that hit Bruce Lee harder than any punch he'd ever taken. "I know that sounds like an exaggeration. It's not. My mother needs money for my medicine," Mei Ling said. "The hospital says she owes $4,000. She works at the textile factory on Lai Chi Coke Road. She makes $30 a week. She can't pay." She looked at her paintings. 14 of them, spread on a blanket on a sidewalk. $5 each. $70 total if she sold every single one. Against a $4,000 hospital bill. "So I paint," Mei Ling said. "I can't work at the factory. I can't carry things or clean things or do anything useful. But I can paint. So I paint and I sell them and I give my mother the money." She said this without self-pity, without tears, without the performance of suffering that adults use to generate sympathy. She said it the way you say something that is simply true. "The sky is blue. Water is wet. My mother can't afford my medicine, so I paint on a sidewalk." Facts, not complaints. Bruce didn't say anything for about 10 seconds. If you know anything about Bruce Lee, you know that silence from him meant something was happening inside. The man talked constantly, philosophized constantly, had an opinion about everything and shared it with everyone whether they wanted to hear it or not. When Bruce Lee went quiet, it meant his brain was working on something that his mouth wasn't ready for yet. He looked at the crane painting, at the girl, at the blanket full of paintings that nobody was buying, at the sidewalk full of people who were walking past a dying kid like she was furniture. "How much for all of them?" Bruce asked. "All of them. All 14. Mei Ling did the math. Quick. The kind of quick that happens when a kid has been doing survival arithmetic since before she could multiply. $70. Bruce reached into his pocket. He pulled out a roll of bills. He peeled off notes and set them on the blanket in front of her. Not $70. $500. Mei Ling stared at the money. 500 Hong Kong dollars in 1972 was roughly 2 months of her mother's factory salary. It was more cash than Mei Ling had ever seen in one place. It was more cash than most of the people walking past her had in their bank accounts. "That's too much," Mei Ling said. "The paintings aren't worth 500. The paintings are worth what someone's willing to pay," Bruce said. "I'm willing to pay 500. The crane alone is worth that." "You're lying." Now I need to tell you something. Most adults, when a 10-year-old calls them a liar, get flustered. They backtrack. They explain. They use their adult voice to smooth things over. Bruce Lee did none of those things. He grinned. The real grin. The one that showed up in interviews when someone said something that genuinely surprised him. "You're right," Bruce said. "The crane isn't worth $500. It's worth more. But 500 is what I have in my pocket." "Who are you?" Mei Ling asked. "Because nobody talks like this. Nobody walks up to a blanket on a sidewalk and drops $500 on 14 paintings and then tells the artist they're undercharging. And here's where it gets interesting. Bruce didn't tell her. He didn't say, 'I'm Bruce Lee, the movie star.' He didn't say anything about himself at all. He just picked up the paintings, stacked them carefully against the bag of roast pork buns, and said something that Mei Ling would think about every day for the rest of her life. 'Fix the crane's leg. Left leg not right. And stop selling these for $5. You're an artist, not a souvenir shop.' He stood up, turned to leave, and that should have been the end of it. Rich guy buys kids paintings. Nice moment. Everybody goes home. But Bruce Lee didn't go home. He went to the hospital. He didn't tell Mei Ling he was going. Didn't tell anyone. He walked from Nathan Road to Queen Elizabeth Hospital, which was about 25 minutes on foot. He walked into the billing department and asked to speak to whoever handled Mei Ling's account. He didn't know her last name. He described her. 10-year-old girl. Cancer patient. Mother works at a textile factory. Bald. Paints watercolors. The clerk knew immediately. Chun Mei Ling. Yes. The account is significantly overdue. How much? $4,200. Bruce paid it. Cash. The full amount. He'd stopped at a bank on the way. He told the clerk one thing. "Don't tell the family where the money came from. Tell them it was a hospital charity program. Tell them anything. But don't use my name." The clerk looked at Bruce Lee, recognized him. Her eyes went wide. She opened her mouth. "Don't," Bruce said. "Not mean. Just firm. This isn't a story. It's a bill getting paid. That's all." The clerk closed her mouth. She processed the payment. She noted the account as paid in full. And she didn't tell anyone. For 22 years, she didn't tell a single person. Not until 1994, long after Bruce Lee was dead, when a journalist tracked her down for a retrospective article about Bruce's philanthropy. Even then, she only confirmed it. She didn't volunteer it. Now here's the part that kills me. And honestly, this is the thing that separates this story from 100 other celebrity charity stories. Bruce went back to Nathan Road the following Saturday. Same time. Same stretch of sidewalk near the ferry terminal. He was looking for the blanket. For the paintings. For the girl. She wasn't there. The blanket was gone. The spot where she'd been sitting was occupied by a man selling batteries and bootleg cassette tapes. Bruce asked around. A food vendor 2 stalls down remembered the girl. "She was here last week. And the week before. Haven't seen her today. I think she might be in the hospital again." Bruce went to the hospital. He didn't go to the billing department this time. He went to the children's ward. He asked at the nursing station. A nurse led him to a room on the 3rd floor. Mei Ling was in bed. Smaller than before. Thinner. And 4 lines running into her arm. Her mother was sitting in a chair beside her. Asleep. Her mother looked like what happens to a 32-year-old woman who works 60 hours a week in a textile factory and spends every free moment in a hospital room. She looked 50. Mei Ling was awake. She was drawing. A pencil and a piece of paper she'd gotten from the nurse's station. She was drawing a crane. Left leg this time. She'd fixed it. Bruce stood in the doorway. He didn't walk in immediately. He watched her draw. Watched her pencil move across the paper with the same loose, confident strokes he'd seen in the watercolors. She was good. She was really genuinely good. Not good for a kid. Good the way people are good when they've been given a gift that has nothing to do with training and everything to do with something they were born with. He knocked on the door frame. Light. 2 knocks. Mei Ling looked up. She recognized him. Not as Bruce Lee. As the man who'd paid too much for her paintings and told her to fix the crane's leg. You fixed it, Bruce said, nodding at the drawing. You were right. Left leg. Can I sit? If you want. He sat in the only other chair in the room. Mei Ling's mother stirred but didn't wake. Bruce looked at the drawing, then at Mei Ling. At the 4. At the monitors. At the room that was too small and too white and too quiet for a 10-year-old. My mother says the hospital made a mistake, Mei Ling said. She says they told her the bill was already paid. Some charity program. Bruce's face didn't change. That's good. She cried all night. She thinks it's a miracle. Maybe it is. I don't believe in miracles, Mei Ling said. I believe in painting. Bruce looked at this girl. 55 pounds. Bald. Dying. Hooked up to machines. And she believed in painting. Not God. Not luck. Not miracles. Painting. The thing she could do with her own hands. The thing nobody had given her and nobody could take away. That's the smartest thing anyone has said to me in a very long time, Bruce said. You're the man who bought my paintings. The one who knows about cranes. I am. My mother says I shouldn't sell anymore. She says we don't need the money now. But I want to keep painting. Then paint. Paint what? Nobody buys them. You were the only person who ever bought one. Paint for yourself. Not for money. Not for customers. For you. Because you're good at it, and being good at something is the only thing in this world that nobody can take from you. He leaned forward. Same posture as the crouch on the sidewalk. I level. Direct. You want to know what I do? I fight. Not because people pay me. Not because I'm famous for it. Because it's the thing I was born to do. Everything else, the movies, the money, the fame, that's just what happened because I refused to stop doing the thing I was born to do. He pointed at the crane drawing. That's your thing. Don't sell it. Don't stop it. Don't let anybody tell you it's not worth doing because you're sick or because nobody's buying. You paint because you're a painter. Period. Mei Ling looked at him. Really looked. The way kids look at adults when they're trying to figure out if this one is lying or not. 10-year-olds are better at this than adults give them credit for. They've been lied to enough to develop radar. What's your name? She asked. And this time Bruce told her. My name is Bruce Lee. Mei Ling's eyes went wide. Not because she was starstruck. Because she knew him. She'd seen Fist of Fury with her mother's neighbor's television through an open window, standing on a crate to see the screen. She'd watched Bruce Lee kick through an entire dojo. And now he was sitting in her hospital room telling her to keep painting. You're the fighter, she said. And you're the painter. Same thing. Different tool. He reached into the bag he'd brought. Not roast pork buns this time. A wooden box. He opened it and set it on her bed. Inside was a set of watercolor paints. Professional grade. 12 colors. Sable brushes. The kind of materials that actual working artists use. Not the school supply stuff she'd been painting with. The real thing. These are Japanese, Bruce said. The best watercolors in the world. A friend of mine in Tokyo sent them to me because he thought I might take up painting. He shrugged. I can't paint. I tried. The brushwork is too slow for me. I'm better with my hands when they're moving fast. He closed the box and pushed it toward her. You'll use them better than I would. Mei Ling touched the box, ran her fingers across the wood, opened it again and looked at the paints, each one in its own ceramic well, the brushes wrapped in cloth, materials that cost more than her mother earned in a month. I can't take these. Why not? They're too good for me. Bruce looked at her with an expression that Mei Ling wouldn't understand until she was much older. The expression of a man who had spent his entire life being told he was too small, too Asian, too foreign, too different, too something to deserve the things he wanted. And who had taken them anyway? Because too good for me was a lie the world told you to keep you small. Nothing is too good for you, Bruce said. You're a painter. These are paints. They belong together. He stood up. Mei Ling's mother was still asleep. The machines beeped. The room was quiet. I'll come back next week, Bruce said. If you've finished a painting with those, I want to see it. You'll really come back? I said I would. People say that a lot. I'm not people. He left the room, walked down the hall, past the nurses' station where 3 nurses were pretending very hard not to stare, past the elevator, through the lobby, out into the Hong Kong afternoon, where 100,000 people were moving through the city without any idea that on the 3rd floor of a hospital behind them, a girl was opening a box of Japanese watercolors and looking at them the way a carpenter looks at a perfect set of tools. Bruce came back. Every Saturday. For 9 months. He'd show up between 10 and 11 a.m., depending on his shooting schedule. He'd sit in the chair beside Mei Ling's bed. She'd show him what she'd painted that week. He'd look at each one with the same slow, careful attention he'd given the paintings on the blanket. He'd critique them. Honestly, specifically, never cruel, never condescending, never the fake praise that adults give sick children to make themselves feel better. The composition is off-center. Move the horizon line up. You're using too much water on the lotus petals. Let the brush do the work. This one is the best you've done. The light is coming from the correct direction. You can feel the warmth. Mei Ling improved. Fast. With professional materials and honest feedback from someone who took her work seriously, she went from good to remarkable in 3 months. Her cranes became so precise that a biology professor could have used them as reference images. Her lotuses developed a luminosity that came from layering washes in a way she'd figured out herself. Her sparrows looked like they might fly off the page. Bruce brought her books. Art books from Japanese masters. Hokusai. Hiroshige. Books she couldn't afford and couldn't find in Hong Kong. She studied them the way Bruce studied fight footage. Frame by frame. Stroke by stroke. Learning by looking until the looking became knowing and the knowing became doing. And they talked. Not just about art. About everything. About fighting. About fear. About what it means to be good at something in a world that doesn't always care if you're good at anything. Are you scared? Bruce asked once. Direct. The way he asked everything. Of dying. Of anything. Mei Ling thought about it. I'm scared of stopping. Of not finishing. Finishing what? I don't know yet. I just know I'm not finished. Bruce nodded. Then don't stop. He died on July 20th, 1973. 9 months after he'd found a girl on a blanket on Nathan Road. He was 32 years old. Mei Ling heard the news from a nurse. She was in the hospital that day. Another round of treatment. The nurse told her gently, carefully, the way you tell a child something that's going to hurt. Mei Ling didn't cry. She picked up her brush, the Japanese sable brush from the wooden box, and she painted. All day, all night. The nurses let her. They understood that this was not a child playing. This was a person processing grief the only way she knew how. With her hands. With color. With the thing nobody gave her and nobody could take from her. She painted a crane. Standing in water. Left leg. Head turned. Catching a fish. The same painting Bruce had picked up from a blanket 9 months earlier and said was worth $500. But this one was better. This one was painted by a girl who had spent 9 months learning from the best watercolors in the world and the most honest critic she'd ever met. This one was alive in a way the first one hadn't been. The water moved. The bird breathed. The light fell exactly the way light falls on a real morning on a real pond. At the bottom of the painting, in tiny characters, she wrote, "For the man who fixed my crane." Chun Mei Ling did not die. The cancer responded to treatment. The treatment that her mother could afford because a stranger had walked into a billing department and paid the bill and told them not to say where the money came from. She left the hospital in January 1974. She was 11 years old. She weighed 62 pounds. She had a wooden box of Japanese watercolors, 3 sketchbooks full of paintings that Bruce Lee had critiqued, and a mother who would never know who had paid the hospital bill until 22 years later when a journalist called and told her. Her mother sat at the kitchen table for a very long time after that phone call. Then she went to the drawer where she kept important things and pulled out a hospital receipt from 1972. Stamped paid in full. Charity program, the clerk had said. Hospital fund. Bruce Lee. The man who bought her dying daughter's paintings on a sidewalk and came back every Saturday for 9 months and never told anyone. Mei Ling became an artist. A real one. She studied at the Hong Kong Academy of Fine Arts. She graduated first in her class. She had her first gallery show at 23. Her work hung in collections in Tokyo, London, and New York. She was known for one subject above all others: cranes. She painted cranes her entire career. Thousands of them. Standing in water. One leg up. Head turned. Catching fish. Every single one on the left leg. Every single one technically perfect. Every single one carrying a memory of a man who stopped at a blanket on a sidewalk and said, "The crane's weight is on the wrong leg." In 2002, 30 years after Bruce Lee found her on Nathan Road, the Hong Kong Museum of Art held a retrospective of Mei Ling's work. 63 paintings. The centerpiece of the exhibition was the painting she'd done the night Bruce died. The crane. Left leg. For the man who fixed my crane. Beside it, mounted on the wall, was a small card with a quote that Mei Ling had given to the museum for the exhibition. It said, "He told me nothing was too good for me. Nobody had ever said that before. Nobody had ever needed to, because after he said it, I never forgot." The wooden box of Japanese watercolors sits on her studio desk. She still uses them. The brushes have been replaced many times. The ceramic paint wells have been refilled hundreds of times. But the box is the same. The same hinges. The same latch. The same wood that a man carried into a hospital room and set on a dying girl's bed because he couldn't paint but she could. She's 61 years old now. Cancer-free for 50 years. Still painting. Still cranes. Still left leg. And every Saturday morning, no matter where she is in the world, no matter what commission she's working on or what gallery is waiting for her next piece, she stops painting at 10 a.m. She puts down her brush. She sits quietly for about 10 minutes. The man who fixed her crane came at 10. Every Saturday. For 9 months. The least she can do is keep his appointment. Some people say Bruce Lee's greatest legacy was his films. Some say it was Jeet Kune Do. Some say it was breaking the bamboo ceiling in Hollywood. Some say it was his philosophy. They're all wrong. Bruce Lee's greatest legacy is a 61-year-old woman in Hong Kong who paints cranes with Japanese watercolors from a wooden box that a dead man gave her when she was 10 years old and told her nothing was too good for her, because he didn't just fix her crane. He fixed her. Left leg. Not right.